Chag Purim Sameach. I'm Doreen Dotan, and this year I am dressing up for Purim as a grape. Just kidding. I'm actually going as a hybrid of a Halloween pumpkin and a hacker. Yeah. Stam. I'm far too mature and I've accrued too much gravitas and veritas for that kind of ludic nonsense. No. I won't be wearing a costume this Purim. The world has gone, it's tay up, yay. And I've been talking about the necessity of getting our imaginations under control. Are my antennas straight? My wings? And things? Our imagination is not the faculty with which we fantasize. If we fantasize with our imaginations, we're not using them correctly. Our imagination is our imaging faculty, and that's what we have to get under control. The Hebrew word for imagination, which also means likeness, is dimayon. There are two very important etymons in English for dimayon. Actually, there are three very important ones. One is dominion, the second one is demon, and the third is derived from the Greek demos, like in democracy, the people. What we experience in this world is a likeness of our subconscious, of what's really going on inside of us. And if that hasn't been consciously accessed and purified, we are likely to have all kinds of experiences that are anything but desirable. That faculty has to be gotten under control. The last two portions in the Torah that we read, Pekudei and Vayikra, on the surface appear to be talking about sacrifices and the work in the Holy Temple, and the interesting part about that is that that's the way things look to those whose imaginations aren't under control. What those two Torah portions are really talking about is our various imaging and creative abilities and cognitive abilities together with our emotions, which shape our reality. And Torah teaches us how to use them properly. One of the very interesting facts about this whole process is that consciousness itself is called toda'ah, or moda'ut, which is in the feminine. And there are various faculties that are also in the feminine. Chokhmah, which is wisdom, Binah, which is understanding, Dat, which is usually translated as knowledge or know-how, but it's actually much higher than that, and I won't get into all that now, but that's in the feminine. And then there are faculties of cognition that are in the masculine. Dimayon, the imagination itself, is in the masculine. So is zikaron, which is memory. And there's shiput, which is judgment. Not being judgmental, but the ability to judge. So within this overarching feminine, receptive awareness, that is, it's the receptive element in our consciousness that receives divine inspiration and then makes images out of it and experiences out of it and even material out of it, has both feminine and masculine elements of it, abilities, and they interact variously. So that's what's really being talked about in these two Torah portions. It's very, very sad that it was understood by the rabbis and then taken even further afield by the Christians that what was being talked about was sacrifices. Sacrifices are not being talked about at all. The word for sacrifice, which is korban, the root of which is kerev, means to draw close. Has nothing to do with sacrificing. When Hashem is talking about bringing various sacrifices, what's actually being talked about is making decisions. It's been said, and correctly so, that when we make a decision, we have cut off the other possibilities. It is an act of pruning. And that's what's actually being talked about. Hashem is saying, make a decision, use your various faculties, and then cut off the lower possibilities. One should approach the cultivation of one's consciousness in the very same way that a koem, how do you say it in English? A vinter, I got it. How a vinter approaches their vineyard, right? Even if you have a cultivated vineyard, weeds will grow, and we have to weed them out, and otherwise they'll take over the vineyard, right? And also, better and less better types of grapes will grow, vines of grapes. There's a Hebrew word for the cultivated vines that produce the very best wine, and it's called hasorek, which is, by the way, it's connected to one of the punctuation marks, shuruk, which has a value of 606 when it's spelled correctly, which is also badam, which means within the blood. And there's the connection of the grapes and the wine and the blood. This is what's actually being talked about, is the cultivation of that which is going to produce the best drunkenness. You see, all experience, all imagining is actually hallucination. One needs to know how to hallucinate wisely and well. One needs to know what ideas and what concepts to get drunk on and which to stay away from. One needs to know what's going to be a good trip and what's going to be a bad trip. And drugs, of course, mimic the naturally occurring chemicals in our brains, which bring about various altered states of consciousness, which is the reason why I'm so adamant about not taking drugs and people not taking drugs in order to attain higher levels of consciousness, because when you do that and you haven't learned how to control your imagination, the trip can go anywhere. And it's always a gamble. Whereas when a person cultivates their own consciousness, they are actually guiding the creation of their own psychotropic chemicals in their brain, such that they will envision and materialize what they will in a positive way. There are a number of traditions that have taught this wisdom. The pseudo-Kabbalah of Judaism is not among them. I'm sorry to say that that's really an offshoot of Babylonian teachings, which not only don't teach the pruning and the development of the imagination in the proper way, they actually teach the imagination a few more steps of the tarantella, and one finds oneself dancing with the devil, out of control. The rabbis will say I'm 100% wrong about that, but take a look at what Israel is experiencing. The proof is always in the pudding. If the rabbis had been under control of their imagining facilities, faculties, and had taught that correctly to Israel, what is happening now wouldn't be happening. So they can talk all they want. The proof is always in the pudding. People who have learned to control their imaginations correctly, wisely, and well live in peace. That wisdom exists within Buddhism, for sure. It exists within the Aboriginal culture. But again, one has to look at what the Aboriginals are actually experiencing in Australia. And one can see that not all of them understood it correctly. So if one goes to learn from an Aboriginal, I would say that they should go to learn from an Aboriginal who's actually living peacefully, who is living peacefully despite European colonization in their country. Someone who's able to live at the level above that. Same thing would go for the Buddhists, obviously. Thich Nhat Hanh had it right, and I'm hoping that there are among his students some people who have really cultivated that properly and are living in peace despite whatever political realities are going on. The rabbinic culture of Judaism, the rabbinic tradition, I should say, of culture of Judaism, has not really done a very good job with that. The Jewish people are plagued with all kinds of troubles, and that would not be the case, not just now, but historically. That would not be happening if the rabbis were teaching correctly. Unfortunately, the Christians were also instructed by people in the early generations in the Pharisaic tradition who did not understand that there are no sacrifices in Torah, and so their imaginations running wild, they came to all kinds of very unfortunate conclusions, and really ran away on a very, very bad trip. My suggestion to those who don't have training in how to use their mind as an integral part of their culture would be either to turn to people in another culture with whom they feel comfortable. Better yet, I would say to turn to Hashem directly and admit that one's own imagination is not serving them wisely and well, and that they're experiencing all manners of disturbance and upheavals in their lives, and to learn how to use their minds wisely and well. That knowledge has to come into the world because we see that things are not calming down. Since 9/11, we have rolled from one disaster to the next, from one crisis to the next. We barely get a chance to breathe before the next one comes along, and now we've got a case in which crises are overlapping. I see what's happening in the streets of Europe, and I'm deeply, deeply concerned and worried about that. I have no truck with Christianity per se, but I most certainly do feel empathy and sympathy and compassion for what Europe is going through, having been invaded by barbarian hordes. And the best way to deal with that is to get one's own imagination under control, so that one is creating a reality in which those kinds of creations can't penetrate. When, the physicists say that two bodies never really touch, that the repulsive forces around electrons, I guess, push things apart, so they never really touch. What you feel is the impact of something else, but actually never touches you. That understanding is derivative from the fact that a person really does exude an aura that really does exist. And we know that what they call nowadays the magnetic field around the heart is orders of magnitude more powerful than the magnetic field around the brain. One has to develop the intentions that will strengthen the field around them that their heart is emitting, such that it becomes very positive and extremely powerful. And when that happens, anyone who doesn't come in peace cannot access you. They can't touch you. They're repelled. So the best thing that one can do to protect oneself is to intend peace, to genuinely intend positive things. Don't say, oh, I already do. There's nothing that you can't get a little better at. If a person is quite convinced that their ability to create peace is at its apex anyway, that person is not under the highest levels of God's protection, let's put it that way, and needs to do some work. At the very core of our being, if we get our imaginations under control, we find what we're emanating from, which can't even be described. It can only be experienced. And there was something online that I want to share with you because it's actually very brilliant, and if one looks into what's being said, we begin to get an idea of what's happening and the layers peel away. This person said that everyone who has ever met us, encountered us, has an image of us. That image is necessarily partial and inaccurate in a number of different ways. Even if the person intends to look at us positively, their image is necessarily limited by what they can see, what their inner world is like, the amount of time you spent together, what you showed them, and so forth and so on. That means that nobody's image of you is exactly right, exactly correct. And that includes your own image of yourself. A person might think that since I spend the most time with myself, obviously my image of myself must be the most complete and accurate of all. Take necessarily so. Even we don't know ourselves completely. Even we don't have a totally comprehensive view. So what that means is our existence is purely a matter of imagination. If you subtract your image of yourself and your friends' images of yourself and your family's images of yourself and the lady in McDonald's images of yourself and so forth and so forth, you'll find that there's nothing there that can be imaged at all. At the very center of your consciousness is that which cannot be imaged. And that's what you're looking for, the experience of that from which everything else emanates, and to learn how to make it emanate at your will, how to be able to stand as though behind your consciousness. You have to kind of be standing back here somewhere and observing yourself, seeing how you're imaging, and direct it and say, no, 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 that's not the best way of seeing things. That's not the best way of thinking about things. Let's change this, let's change that. If an idea arises in your mind, or an impulse or a feeling that's really negative, you know, cut that weed off at the root immediately. Don't let it grow. And to become the cultivators of our imagining, so that our worlds become peaceful. And when we do that, and we become really skillful at doing that, no one who's coming with negativity can enter our world. Thank you for listening, and Chag Purim Sameach. I'll wait until Shabbat goes out in the Wild Wild West too, and then this will be on air. Thank you for listening. Chag Sameach and Kol Tov.